The woman they called washed up just shattered every Navy SEAL shooting record in 12 seconds flat. 3 hours earlier, she was being laughed off the range by men who thought her silence meant weakness. They had no idea that some legends hide in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to remind the world what true strength looks like. Everyone who humiliated her was about to learn why silence speaks louder than rank, and why dismissing someone based on appearance can cost more than pride, because Sarah Mitchell wasn't just any shooter. She was the daughter of Ghost 2-3, and today, the ghost would finally speak through her daughter's hands. The morning sun cast long shadows across the exclusive naval base shooting range in San Diego, where the elite came to prove their worth with weapons that demanded respect. This wasn't a place for weekend warriors or curious civilians. Every lane was reserved for SEALs, Rangers, and Special Operations personnel who had earned their right to be here through blood, sweat, and confirmed kills. The air hung thick with testosterone, hierarchy, and the unspoken understanding that this sacred ground belonged to those who had faced death and survived. Colonel Marcus Hayes commanded this domain like a king surveying his kingdom, his 20-year career etched in every confident stride and dismissive glance. Around him, subordinates moved with the practiced deference of men who knew their place in the rigid military structure that governed every interaction. When Sarah Mitchell walked through those doors, she might as well have been stepping into a lion's den, armed with nothing but quiet determination. Her unremarkable civilian clothes and worn duffel bag marked her as an outsider in a world where appearance meant everything and first impressions determined your fate. She moved with a strange contradiction. Nervous energy that betrayed her anxiety, yet an underlying confidence that suggested she belonged here more than anyone realized. The blonde woman in her mid-30s approached the range desk with the kind of polite persistence that military men often mistook for weakness, requesting nothing more than basic lane rental to practice her shooting skills. Colonel Hayes felt an inexplicable irritation the moment he saw her, something deep in his subconscious stirring memories he couldn't quite place. Her blonde hair caught the light in a way that reminded him of someone from his past, someone who had made him feel small and inadequate in ways his ego refused to acknowledge. Sergeant Rodriguez, still carrying the weight of his sister's death in combat, saw in Sarah's quiet vulnerability the same helplessness he felt when Maria's flag-draped coffin returned home. Lieutenant Chen, desperate to prove his belonging in this masculine world, felt the familiar pressure to choose between his immigrant family's values of respect and the pure acceptance he craved so desperately. The atmosphere shifted from professional indifference to active hostility as Hayes decided to make an example of this presumptuous civilian who dared to intrude on their sacred space. His voice carried the authority of rank and the cruel certainty of a man who had never been challenged by someone he considered beneath him. "Maybe your husband sent you here as a joke," he suggested with a laugh that invited others to join his mockery. Rodriguez, his grief transformed into misplaced anger, hoped she brought tissues for when she missed everything, his voice cracking with the pain he couldn't acknowledge. Chen, betraying every principle his parents had taught him, asked if they should call the medic now or wait, his desperate need for acceptance overriding his moral compass. Sarah's response was silence. Not the silence of defeat, but the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove to small men with loud voices. She continued her methodical equipment setup, her movements precise and deliberate, as if she were preparing for something far more significant than a simple shooting test. The growing crowd of onlookers began placing bets on how quickly she would quit, their cell phones ready to capture what they assumed would be a spectacular failure. But Thompson, the range master with 30 years of experience, noticed something in her stance that made him pause. The way she checked her sightlines, the automatic weapons safety protocols, the breathing technique that spoke of serious training. Hayes, emboldened by the crowd's support and driven by memories he couldn't understand, issued his challenge with the cruel confidence of a predator circling wounded prey. "Standard military qualification course," he declared. Stakes set to humiliate. If she failed, she would leave immediately and never return. If she somehow passed, she would earn 1 day of range access, terms so unfair that even some veterans shifted uncomfortably. Sarah's simple nod of acceptance carried no negotiation, no complaint, just the quiet dignity of someone who had faced far worse than the petty cruelty of insecure men. The first shots changed everything. Sarah's preliminary rounds hit center mass with a precision that made the laughter die in throats and replaced mockery with uncomfortable silence. Hayes dismissed it as beginner's luck, but his confidence wavered as her second group clustered tighter and her third group achieved the kind of consistency that professionals spend years developing. The crowd noise decreased from raucous entertainment to nervous whispers as those with real shooting experience began to recognize something extraordinary unfolding before their eyes. When Sarah requested the 100-yard precision test, Hayes agreed with diminishing enthusiasm, sensing that his simple humiliation was becoming something else entirely. The dead silence that followed her perfect group at 100 yards felt like the moment before thunder, heavy with the weight of realization that everything they thought they knew was wrong. Thompson approached the target with the reverence of a man examining a miracle, his face pale with recognition and growing respect. The results spoke louder than any words could, each bullet hole a punctuation mark in a sentence that was rewriting everyone's understanding of the quiet woman in lane 7. Hayes felt the first real tremor of concern as Thompson whispered something that made his eyes widen in shock, the confident smile finally dying on his lips as he realized he might have made a terrible mistake. Sarah continued shooting as if nothing had happened, her calm demeanor now unnerving rather than amusing, because everyone was watching for a different reason entirely. The woman they had dismissed as a joke was systematically destroying every assumption they had made about her, and something in the way she handled that weapon suggested they had only seen the beginning of her capabilities. Can you guess what Thompson whispered to Colonel Hayes that changed everything? The answer would shatter every preconception they held about the quiet woman who had walked into their world with nothing but a worn duffel bag and the kind of silence that only comes from those who have nothing left to prove. But here's what Colonel Hayes didn't know, and what you're about to discover. About the woman standing calmly at the firing line, methodically destroying every target with the precision of someone who had learned to shoot under circumstances that would break most people. Thompson's whispered revelation hit Hayes like a physical blow. 3 words that changed everything. Ghost 23's daughter. The name struck him like lightning, instantly connecting the blonde hair, the quiet confidence, and the impossible accuracy to memories he had buried deep in his subconscious. Commander Elena Mitchell had been more than just a legend. She had been Hayes' commanding officer in 2003, the woman who had saved his failing career and taught him lessons about leadership that he had apparently forgotten. The crowd fell silent as Thompson addressed them with the reverence reserved for military royalty, his voice carrying the weight of recognition and respect. "Gentlemen," he announced, "meet Sarah Mitchell, daughter of Commander Elena Mitchell," and watched as understanding dawned on faces that had been twisted with mockery just moments before. Elena Mitchell wasn't just any sniper. She was the woman with 47 confirmed kills, the Ghost 23 who had trained half the special operations community and saved countless lives through her impossible accuracy and unwavering courage. Sarah hadn't just inherited her mother's eyes. She had inherited a legacy that made every person in that room feel smaller than they had ever imagined. Hayes felt his world crumble as the full weight of his mistake crashed over him like a tsunami of shame and recognition. The memories came flooding back. Lieutenant Hayes missing crucial shots during training. Elena's patient voice explaining that precision comes from respect, not ego. She had seen something in him worth saving. Recommending him for a different specialty when his marksmanship proved inadequate, her final words echoing across the decades. "You'll make a fine leader if you remember humility." Now, 20 years later, he had become everything she had warned against, humiliating her daughter in front of the very men she had died protecting. The revelation of Sarah's military record hit the assembled crowd like a series of physical blows, each accomplishment more devastating than the last. Marine Scout Sniper School honor graduate, 89 confirmed kills across multiple deployments, trainer of Navy SEALs in advanced marksmanship, recipient of the Silver Star and 2 Bronze Stars. Her call sign, Viper 1 New, was whispered with the kind of reverence usually reserved for legends. And suddenly every cruel joke and dismissive comment felt like a desecration of something sacred. Rodriguez began crying openly as he realized that his grief-fueled attack had been directed at exactly the kind of person his sister Maria had died defending, the shame overwhelming his ability to maintain the facade of military bearing. The story of Sarah's tragic past emerged through Thompson's careful account, each detail adding weight to the growing understanding of what they had witnessed. Sarah had been her mother's spotter on Elena's final mission, the Kandahar incident in 2019 that had gone catastrophically wrong. When Taliban forces ambushed the extraction team, Elena had stayed behind to provide covering fire. Her final radio transmission burned into Sarah's memory forever. Viper 1, noon, get our people home. Sarah had carried that guilt for 3 years, her confidence shattered by survivor's guilt and the weight of watching her mother sacrifice herself for others. Hayes experienced a complete psychological breakdown as the full scope of Elena's mentorship flooded back to him, her patient teaching transforming a failing officer into someone worthy of leading others. "Every shot honors those we protect," she had told him, personally pinning his marksman badge at graduation with the prophecy that would haunt him forever. "You'll make a fine leader if you remember humility." Standing there, watching Elena's daughter demonstrate the very skills her mother had tried to teach him, Hayes realized he had dishonored not just Sarah, but the memory of the woman who had saved his career and possibly his life. Chen's identity crisis played out in real time as he recognized the magnitude of his betrayal, not just of Sarah, but of the immigrant parents who had sacrificed everything to give him the opportunity to serve with honor. His father's words about respecting those who had served echoed in his mind as he realized he had abandoned every principle his family held sacred in his desperate quest for acceptance. The cultural weight of his shame was crushing, but it also provided clarity. He could choose integrity over popularity, honor over acceptance, and begin the long journey back to the man his parents had raised him to be. The dramatic irony reached its peak as everyone realized they had not just mocked a war hero, but the daughter of a legend who had personally touched many of their lives. Sarah's silence was now understood not as weakness, but as the restraint of someone who had learned that some battles aren't worth fighting, and that true strength often speaks in whispers rather than shouts. Her amateur equipment was irrelevant to skills honed in the crucible of combat, and her quiet demeanor was the mark of someone who had seen too much to be impressed by the posturing of those who had seen too little. When Sarah switched to her mother's preferred rifle setup and fired at the 200-yard target with iron sights, achieving a perfect headshot group with 5 rounds, Thompson's quiet comment carried the weight of prophecy fulfilled, just like Elena taught her. The witnesses understood they were seeing history unfold, not just exceptional marksmanship, but the resurrection of a legend they thought had died in the mountains of Afghanistan. Cell phone recordings that had begun as mockery now captured respect, and word spread throughout the base with the speed of wildfire carrying news of a miracle. Hayes's attempted redemption came through emotional confession, his voice breaking as he revealed how Elena had saved his career and shaped his understanding of leadership. The full disclosure of his failure as a young officer, Elena's patient mentorship, and his present shame at betraying her lessons through his treatment of her daughter poured out in a desperate attempt to somehow undo the damage he had caused. "I dishonored her memory," he whispered, the words carrying the weight of a man who had finally understood the magnitude of his failure. But redemption, like respect, cannot be demanded. It must be earned through actions, not words. And Hayes was just beginning to understand the long journey that lay ahead. The deeper truth about Sarah's visit to the range began to emerge as the crowd processed what they had witnessed. She hadn't come to prove anything to them. She had come to prove something to herself, to face the demons that had kept her from touching a weapon for 3 years. The range had become her personal battlefield for recovery, and their cruelty had inadvertently provided the test she needed to take the first step toward healing. When she fired her final shot at 300 yards, achieving bullseye precision with military exactness, the tears in her eyes were not from shame, but from the recognition that she still carried her mother's gift, and that Elena's sacrifice had not been in vain. This is what happens when you never judge a book by its cover, when assumptions based on appearance collide with reality forged in the crucible of combat. Have you ever witnessed someone prove their doubters wrong in such a spectacular fashion? The transformation from contempt to respect was complete, but Sarah's demonstration was far from over, and what she did next would cement her legend in the annals of military history forever. The immediate aftermath of the revelation transformed the range from a place of humiliation into a shrine of respect, with Hayes publicly acknowledging his mistake in front of the entire crowd. His emotional confession about Elena's impact on his life carried the weight of genuine remorse, but words alone could not repair the damage done to his reputation among peers who had witnessed his fall from grace. Rodriguez's complete breakdown as he shared the story of his sister's death marked the beginning of his journey toward healing, the realization that he had become what Maria died fighting against, serving as a catalyst for genuine change. Chen's cultural shame at betraying his family's values led to a moment of clarity where he chose integrity over acceptance, beginning his transformation from follower to leader. The base commander, Colonel Patricia Williams, appeared with the kind of timing that suggested she had been monitoring the situation from the beginning. Her personal knowledge of Elena Mitchell added another layer of validation to Sarah's story, and her offer of a civilian marksmanship instructor position represented official recognition of what everyone had just witnessed. Hayes faced formal reprimand for unprofessional conduct, but the real punishment was the knowledge that he had failed to live up to the example set by the woman who had once believed in him. Sarah's status changed from unwelcome intruder to honored guest, and the range itself was renamed the Ghost Memorial Range in honor of Elena's sacrifice. The attitude shift was immediate and profound, with personnel who had mocked Sarah now requesting training from the woman they had dismissed as a joke. Younger soldiers asked for autographs from a living legend, while veterans shared stories of Elena Mitchell that painted a picture of a woman whose influence had extended far beyond her confirmed kills. Sarah became an unofficial base legend within hours, her story spreading through military channels with the speed of digital communication and the staying power of true inspiration. The ripple effect extended beyond the base as social media posts went viral, military blogs featured her story, and she became a symbol of hidden heroes everywhere. Hayes's personal transformation began with Elena's lessons resurfacing in his memory, reminding him of the leader he had once aspired to be. His career redirection toward mentoring others represented more than just damage control. It was a genuine attempt to honor Elena's memory by becoming the kind of leader she had tried to teach him to be. Rodriguez found healing through his breakdown, beginning to process his grief constructively rather than projecting it onto others. Chen's redemption came through his choice to become an advocate for respectful treatment, using his own shame as a teaching tool for other young officers struggling with similar pressures. Sarah's gradual opening to the respectful personnel around her marked the beginning of her own healing process, as she began sharing tactical knowledge with eager learners and telling stories about her mother's techniques. Teaching others became a path to healing, and she found purpose in honoring Elena's memory through the transmission of knowledge and skills that had once been used to protect others. The community that formed around her was organic and genuine, built on respect rather than fear, understanding rather than assumption. The training sessions that began that day transformed the culture of the base, with Sarah conducting impromptu marksmanship classes that demonstrated advanced techniques and corrected fundamental errors in trainees. Her patience with struggling shooters and ability to build confidence through positive reinforcement stood in stark contrast to the military's traditional approach to training. The ripple effect of her influence extended far beyond marksmanship, as her example of quiet strength and dignified response to adversity became a model for others to follow. Command recognition came swiftly, with Colonel Williams offering a formal military consultant position and access to all base training facilities. The Pentagon's interest in Sarah's expertise opened doors that had been closed since her resignation, and Hollywood producers requesting film rights only confirmed what everyone already knew: they had witnessed something extraordinary. But Sarah's response to fame was as measured as her response to insult had been, declining media attention with the same quiet dignity that had marked her entire demonstration. The personal healing that took place in the following days was perhaps more significant than the professional vindication. Sarah's visit to the base memorial wall, where she found her mother's name engraved among the fallen, provided closure that had been missing for 3 years. Leaving flowers and her mother's final letter, she spoke to Elena's photo for the first time since the funeral, promising to honor her sacrifice by continuing to serve in whatever capacity she could. The whispered conversation between mother and daughter, separated by death but united in purpose, marked the true beginning of Sarah's recovery. The community that embraced Sarah extended beyond the military, to include base families, military spouses, and children who wanted to hear war stories from someone who had lived them. Her polite refusal of most media attention only increased the mystique surrounding her story, and local news outlets found themselves reporting on a modern legend who preferred action to words. The professional vindication that followed was impressive. Military instructors seeking her techniques, SEAL teams requesting training sessions, sniper schools wanting her curriculum input. But Sarah remained focused on the personal healing that came through service to others. Sarah's journey from grief to purpose shows how healing happens not through forgetting the past, but through transforming pain into purpose. What are your thoughts on second chances and the power of quiet strength? Her story reminds us that true heroism often wears civilian clothes and speaks in whispers rather than shouts, and that the most powerful demonstrations of strength often come from those who have nothing left to prove. But Sarah had one final surprise that would leave everyone speechless. A demonstration that would transcend mere marksmanship and enter the realm of legend. As the sun set over the range, she stood before the gathered crowd with a different energy, no longer defending herself, but preparing to honor every fallen hero who never got the chance to prove their worth. The impossible shot she was about to attempt would echo through military history and cement her place among the legends her mother had helped create. The ultimate test, Sarah announced, transcended mere demonstration and entered the realm of tribute. A 500-yard precision shot with iron sights that would challenge the limits of human capability. Even her supporters worried about the possibility of failure, understanding that success at this range required not just skill, but the kind of divine intervention that separates legends from mortals. Sarah positioned the target at maximum range and selected her mother's vintage rifle, the same weapon Elena had used in her final mission, carrying the emotional weight of sacrifice and the technical challenge of equipment that belonged to a different era. Hayes approached Sarah privately for a final confession that would complete his transformation from antagonist to advocate. "Your mother's last words to me," he whispered, "were about someone who would need my protection one day. She was talking about you, and I failed her completely." His promise to spend the remainder of his career honoring Elena's lesson represented genuine redemption, the kind that comes not from forgiveness, but from changed behavior. Rodriguez stood with Sarah as she prepared for the shot, his presence offering support for Maria and Elena both, finding peace in the shared honor of fallen heroes. Chen's growth was evident in his cultural pride and newfound integrity, his choice to guide others toward respectful behavior, representing the kind of leadership his parents had always hoped he would demonstrate. The ritual Sarah performed before the shot was sacred in its deliberation. Her mother's pre-shot routine, the whispered prayer Elena had taught her, the wind adjustment based on instinct rather than instruments. Every movement was deliberate and meaningful, connecting past to present in a demonstration that transcended mere accuracy. The impossible shot, a perfect bullseye at 500 yards, created a moment of stunned silence that seemed to stretch across eternity. When the crowd finally erupted in amazement, their cheers carried the weight of witnessing something that would be told and retold for generations. Even Hayes showed genuine respect, his salute carrying the full weight of his rank and recognition. Thompson's silent salute spoke louder than any words, and Sarah's freely flowing tears marked the completion of her journey from grief to healing. The revelation's final layer emerged as Sarah revealed her mother's last gift, a letter containing shooting techniques never shared with the military, methods that Alina had developed through years of combat experience and passed to her daughter alone. Sarah's decision to share this knowledge with worthy successors created a living memorial to her mother, transforming personal pain into collective strength. The teaching moment that followed was more than instruction. It was the passing of a sacred trust from one generation to the next. The symbolic gesture of leaving Elena's photo on the range created a permanent memorial that would inspire future generations of shooters. The annual shooting competition Sarah established, named the Ghost 2-3 Memorial, ensured that her mother's legacy would endure long after the last witness to this day had passed away. The quiet revolution that began with Sarah's demonstration would transform not just the culture of one base, but the entire military's approach to respect, inclusion, and the recognition of hidden heroes. The network that formed around Sarah was organic and powerful, as veterans reached out to share their own stories and find healing in community. Support systems developed naturally, creating a movement toward openness and vulnerability that challenged the traditional military culture of silence and stoicism. Stories of other hidden heroes began to surface, each one adding to the growing understanding that strength comes in many forms, and that the most powerful warriors often fight their greatest battles in silence. Sarah's transformation from grieving daughter to inspirational teacher provided a model for others struggling with similar trauma. Her embrace of the teaching role, combined with her refusal to be defined by her past, showed that healing was possible even for those who had lost everything. The bridge she built between generations of warriors created a pathway for knowledge transfer that honored the past while preparing for the future. The final demonstration Sarah performed was dedicated to all fallen heroes, a perfect execution under pressure that elevated her from skilled shooter to living legend. The moment became instant military folklore, the kind of story that would be told and retold until fact and legend blended into something larger than both. Her silent departure, without fanfare or grand speeches, only added to the mystique surrounding her visit, proving that true legends create themselves through actions rather than words. The ongoing legacy of Sarah's visit transformed the range into a pilgrimage site where future generations would come to learn not just marksmanship, but the deeper lessons about respect, humility, and the power of quiet strength. Her techniques spread worldwide, carried by those who had witnessed her demonstration and understood that they had seen something extraordinary. Elena's memory was honored daily through the continued use of her methods, and veterans found healing through Sarah's example of transformation from grief to purpose. This story reminds us that heroes walk among us every day, often unrecognized and unappreciated until circumstances reveal their true nature. Sarah's transformation from grief to purpose shows the power of honoring our fallen heroes and the importance of never judging others based on appearance or assumption. What veteran in your life deserves recognition for their service and sacrifice? Sarah drove away from the base as the sun painted the sky in shades of honor and remembrance, her silhouette against the sunset representing the bridge between past and future, between loss and hope. The text from the Pentagon waiting on her phone suggested that new missions awaited, new opportunities to serve and teach and heal. Behind her, the base flag flew at half-mast in honor of Elena Mitchell, and the range that bore her name was quiet now, waiting for tomorrow's training sessions. The lasting impact of Sarah's visit extended far beyond a single day's demonstration, transforming Hayes into a leader who taught diversity and inclusion, making the base a model for military culture change. Her story became required reading in leadership schools, and veterans across the country found their voices through her example of quiet courage and dignified strength. The military began this slow transformation toward a more inclusive and respectful culture, one demonstration at a time. The closing image of Sarah's departure carried the weight of legend, driving toward an unknown future while leaving behind a legacy that would inspire generations. Ghost 2-3's mission continued through her daughter's hands, not in the shadows of combat, but but in the light of teaching and healing. Some legends are born in battle, but others are forged in the quiet moments when ordinary people choose extraordinary courage, and Sarah Mitchell had chosen both. In military circles, they still talk about the day a simple woman walked onto a shooting range and reminded everyone what true strength looks like. They call her Viper 1 Noon now, but she prefers Sarah, the name that connects her to her mother and to the community of heroes who continue to serve in silence. The ghost lives on, not in the shadows of the past, but in the light she brings to others, proving that the most powerful legends are written not in blood, but in the quiet moments when courage chooses to speak through action rather than words. This story of hidden heroism and quiet strength reminds us that the most powerful demonstrations of courage often come from those who have nothing left to prove. Subscribe to hear more stories of courage, sacrifice, and redemption, because every hero deserves to have their story told, and every act of quiet bravery deserves to be remembered. What other hidden heroes should we honor with our attention and respect?
Oh, Daisy here. Có người hỏi tôi rằng là tôi lấy ý tưởng video từ đâu? Great questions. Mình sẽ làm video chia sẻ về process sáng tạo nhé. Hãy thêm câu hỏi dưới phần comments và đừng quên subscribe để không bỏ lỡ Q&A video nha.